And that actually touches on, I think, a little bit of a hot topic as well, in the sense that I think something that evolved out of the pandemic is a very high level of leniency in terms of how we expect
Yes.
people to show up. And I think many companies, and this was understandable during the pandemic because nobody had a choice, right? People were dealing with a lot mentally, emotionally, et cetera. Uh, but I think some leaders are almost hesitant to make these expectations clear. Like
Yeah.
I do expect you to show up on video. I expect you to be in a place where you have good enough internet connection, um, a good professional Zoom setup, because this is a reflection of who you are as a professional.
Yes.
And I expect these things because this is an important moment for our team to show up together, to collaborate, to brainstorm, to share ideas, etc. But I think a lot of people are like almost scared to make that expectation clear with their
I
team.
completely agree. There's definitely a hesitancy
Yeah.
and a leniency as well. And what we have to remember is every one of our employees, everyone that wears our badge, everyone that wears our logo, everyone that wears our name is a reflection of us.
Yeah.
Do you want them to be a reflection of you if they don't carry themselves professionally, if they
Right.
don't have a professional setup? And you don't need anything extravagant,
Right.
just a clean background, a
Mhm.
good camera setup, a
Mhm.
good microphone. Those things are really important because they do have an effect on our perception of capability, of competence, of confidence, as we already discussed.
Right.
Those are things you want associated with your business. And it's not just that, too. The reverse is also true. When people don't show up and don't have good communication, it has a negative effect. It's not just that we're missing the positive,
Mhm.
they're perceived as messy
Right.
and less competent, less confident,
Mhm.
less capable. I don't want those things associated with my brand. Do
Yeah.
you?
Right.
And it is hard to enforce those policies when there is this tendency to be more lenient. But if those individuals aren't able to show up for themselves and show up for the company, then they shouldn't be part of the company.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's it's I think in order of how things have to happen, like first of all, those intentions have to be made very clear. They have to be
Yes.
communicated. And then the employers have to provide resources to their employees to help them succeed, right? If
Absolutely.
there is any kind of remote culture, there should be some kind of budget that ensures that these employees can have the right microphone, the right camera, et cetera. And then there has to be the education and the skills building, right? Which is, of course,
Yes.
where things like virtual sapiens come into play.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting to think about how much of this might have been done in person, just from like a manager being able to oversee a room full of people and give little bits of feedback here and there. In the remote world, you miss a little bit of that, right? So the onus at the end of the day, the onus is really on the employers and the leaders to communicate these expectations clearly, outfit your employees with the things they need to be successful, and then enforce, right? Like make
Yeah.
sure that people are being held accountable to these expectations and really showing up, because otherwise at the end of the day, I feel like everyone's just wasting their time.
Yeah, and that's a really good point about education. As an employer, it's your duty to make sure that you provide your staff that education. If
Mhm.
they don't know that there's a problem, they can't fix it. If
Right.
they're not aware of the importance of nonverbal communication, because not everybody is, and there's so many myths out there about nonverbals, how do they know where to go for their sources of information? Maybe
Yes.
they're trying their best, but they're looking on TikTok. And that is the biggest source of misinformation, especially when it comes to anything science and psychology.
Mhm.
So they're doing their best, but they're not being provided with an adequate education. That's your job. Maybe they really want to present themselves effectively, but they don't have the money to have a good camera setup or a
Mhm.
good microphone setup. That's your responsibility. And again, they need to be aware of why it's important so they can start addressing it. Once they have the education and they have the resources, now it's up to them to make that. And if they're not willing, then that's when you say, okay, maybe we part ways.
Yeah.
But until you provide those things, you can't assess whether they are willing because you're not providing them the opportunity to do so.
Right. Yeah. And just to, I think, tie things off, because this is I think the way some of the implications of AI and tech and virtual meetings and the expectations we have around them will have such long-lasting impact in terms of the way we communicate, the way we show up virtually, but also in person, right? And I think it's really something to continue to monitor and just discuss. So we should do this again.
Definitely.
There's so much to discuss, but yeah, awesome. Thanks.